1993, and somewhere in Chicago, Billy Corgan is sitting in a studio perfecting the same guitar part for the 47th time while simultaneously alienating every musician within a 500-mile radius. This is a man who managed to start feuds with Pavement, Radiohead, Courtney Love, his own bandmates, music journalists, and probably the guy who delivered his lunch. If there was a way to turn making beautiful music into making beautiful enemies, Billy Corgan found it. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Billy Corgan wasn't just a difficult perfectionist. He was a walking contradiction machine who somehow created some of the most emotionally devastating music of the 90s while being absolutely impossible to work with. He was like a feelings vampire who sucked all the joy out of every room he entered, then used that misery to write songs that made millions of teenagers feel understood. This is the story of how the Smashing Pumpkins became the most successful band that everyone in the music industry secretly hated. Spoiler alert, it involves more studio drama than a reality TV show, enough ego to power a small city, and the kind of perfectionism that borders on mental illness. But before we dive into this beautiful disaster of interpersonal relationships, quick thing, if you're here because you love messy 90s band drama, or you're just fascinated by how one man can start beef with literally everyone, smash that subscribe button because I've got approximately 37 more stories about musicians who were their own worst enemies. Also, like the video because Billy would hate that you're engaging with algorithmic content about him, which makes it even funnier. Right. Let's get properly unhinged about the most unhinged perfectionist in alternative rock. So, Chicago, late 80s, Billy Corgan is this weird, bald, gangly kid who looks like he was assembled from spare parts by someone who'd only heard bands described secondhand. He's got this nasal voice that sounds like Geddy Lee being strangled, and he's obsessed with metal, but also The Cure, but also early electronic music, but also prog rock, which should be a recipe for complete disaster, but somehow works because Billy's brain operates on pure contrarian logic. Picture this. While other kids are choosing between being metalheads or goths, Billy's over here making musical shopping lists that include Black Sabbath, Depeche Mode, Queen, and probably some obscure krautrock band nobody's heard of. It's like he deliberately chose influences that would piss off the maximum number of purists. He starts the Smashing Pumpkins in 1988 with James Iha on guitar, Darcy Wretzky on bass, and Jimmy Chamberlin on drums. On paper, it's a perfect lineup. Iha's the cool, understated one with actual taste in clothes. Darcy's the mysterious, beautiful one who looks like she stepped out of a Tim Burton movie. Jimmy's the powerhouse who can play any style and probably has cocaine for breakfast. And Billy's the one who writes everything, controls everything, and slowly drives everyone insane through the sheer force of his neuroses. Their early shows are mental. Billy's playing guitar like he's trying to murder it for crimes against his childhood, singing like he's auditioning for a horror movie about depressed aliens, and writing songs about depression, alienation, and feeling like a freak in a world designed for normal people. But it's not just angst, it's sophisticated angst. These aren't three-chord tantrums thrown by teenagers who discovered minor keys last week. They're carefully constructed emotional hurricanes engineered by someone who's read way too much poetry and has opinions about guitar tone that border on religious extremism. The early Pumpkin sound is completely unhinged in the best way. Billy's layering guitars like he's trying to build a wall of sound tall enough to keep out all human interaction, and somehow it works. They're too heavy for indie kids, too weird for metalheads, too emotional for punks, and too complex for grunge fans. It's like they've accidentally invented a genre that pisses off everyone equally. Gish comes out in 1991, and it's immediately obvious that something special and terrible is happening. The production is massive, the songs are complex, and Billy's already showing signs of the control freak he'll become. He plays most of the guitar and bass parts himself because he doesn't trust anyone else to get it right, which is both genius and completely insulting to his bandmates. Imagine being in a band where your own songwriter doesn't think you're good enough to play your own instrument on your own album. It's like being invited to a dinner party where the host makes you watch them eat. The album gets critical acclaim, but it also establishes a pattern that will basically destroy everyone involved. Billy writes brilliant music, then makes everyone else's life miserable while recording it.
It's like he's discovered that suffering produces great art, so he's appointed himself chief suffering officer for everyone in a 50-foot radius. But the real problems start when they get successful. Siamese Dream in 1993 is where Billy's perfectionism goes completely off the rails. He spends months in the studio redoing every part until it's exactly how he wants it. James and Darcy basically become touring musicians in their own band. Jimmy's struggling with heroin addiction, and Billy's response is to work him harder instead of getting him help. The album is a masterpiece, but it breaks the band in ways they'll never recover from. Billy's proven he can make perfect music, but he's also proven he'll destroy anyone who gets in the way of that perfection. And that's when the feuds start. First up, Pavement. In Range Life, Stephen Malkmus makes some offhand comment about how the Smashing Pumpkins are trying too hard, which is like telling Billy his baby is ugly, stupid, and probably adopted. Out on tour with the Smashing Pumpkins, Nature Kid's Eye, they don't have no function, I don't understand what they mean, and I could really give a fuck, Malkmus sings. Billy responds by spending the next 30 decades making passive-aggressive comments about indie rock and how Pavement represents everything that's wrong with 90s music. The slacker attitude, the deliberate lo-fi production, the whole caring is uncool aesthetic that Billy finds personally offensive. It's beautiful, really. Here's Billy, who's selling millions of albums and headlining festivals, getting genuinely upset that some indie band from California thinks he's uncool. The insecurity is so pure, it's almost artistic. It's like watching a successful CEO have a meltdown because the cool kids at school still won't sit with him at lunch. Malcolm has probably forgot about the comment 5 minutes after making it, but Billy's over here filing it away in his mental database of slights to be avenged. He starts giving interviews where he talks about how indie rock is just an excuse for lazy songwriting, how lo-fi production is just covering up musical incompetence, and how Pavement's whole aesthetic is basically musical cowardice dressed up as authenticity. Billy got so offended, some might say, he reportedly made Lollapalooza take Pavement away from their lineup and threatened to pull out the Smashing Pumpkins if they didn't. And yeah, the Smashing Pumpkins did pull out that year, 1994. Then there's the Courtney Love situation, which is like watching two nuclear reactors try to have a romantic dinner. They dated before Courtney met the guy who wrote Come As You Are, and you know what happened after that. After Kurt Cobain dies in 1994, there's this weird power vacuum in alternative rock, and both Billy and Courtney are trying to fill it through sheer force of personality and media manipulation. They start dating briefly, which is like watching two black holes try to orbit each other while both claiming they're actually stars. The relationship implodes spectacularly, as everyone with functioning brain cells could have predicted. Billy's need to control everything meets Courtney's need to control everything, and the resulting explosion can probably be seen from space. Suddenly, they're having public feuds about everything, from musical credibility to who was closer to Kurt, who understood grunge better, who's more authentic, who's more damaged, who has better drugs. Billy starts making comments about how Hole's music isn't really Courtney's, which is fighting words in the post-Riot Grrrl landscape, and also incredibly stupid because Courtney Love is not someone you want to get into a public warfare with. She's got more media savvy in her left pinky than most people have in their entire bodies, and she's not afraid to use it. Courtney responds by basically calling him a pretentious sexist control freak who probably irons his underwear and has opinions about the correct way to fold napkins, which isn't entirely inaccurate. The whole thing becomes this meta-commentary on 90s gender politics, artistic authenticity, and what happens when two people who are used to being the most difficult person in any room try to date each other. But the real genius of Billy's beef magnetism is how he manages to alienate people who should be his natural allies. Take Radiohead. Both bands are making complex, ambitious music for sad kids who wear black and have strong opinions about the Smiths. They should be friends, bonding over their shared love of complicated time signatures and emotional devastation. Instead, Billy makes some comment about how OK Computer is overrated, which is like walking into a cathedral and announcing that you think the architecture is pretty good, I guess.
It's like Billy has a supernatural ability to find the exact thing that will piss off any given person and then say that thing in the most condescending way possible, usually while adjusting his glasses like a professor explaining why your favorite book is actually garbage. He's got this talent for making valid artistic criticisms sound like personal attacks, probably because for Billy there is no difference between the two. The Radiohead situation is particularly mental because Thom Yorke is almost as difficult and perfectionist as Billy, which means you've got two control freaks who both think they're the more serious artist having a passive-aggressive standoff through British music magazines. It's like watching two chess grandmasters play each other, except instead of chess pieces, they're using hurt feelings and career anxiety. The media feuds are even better. Billy decides that music journalists are the enemy, which is a bold strategy for someone whose career depends on media coverage. He starts giving interviews where he lectures writers about how they don't understand real music, how they're just trend followers, how they wouldn't recognize genius if it bit them. The journalists predictably start writing articles about what a pretentious asshole Billy Corgan is. Billy responds by giving more interviews about how the media is biased against him. It's a beautiful cycle of mutually assured destruction. But here's where it gets really mental: the internal band drama. By the mid-90s, the Smashing Pumpkins are one of the biggest bands in the world, selling out arenas and headlining festivals, but Billy's basically fired everyone emotionally. James and Darcy are relegated to backing musicians in their own band, standing on stage looking beautiful while Billy plays all their parts on the album. It's like being invited to your own birthday party and then being told you're not allowed to blow out the candles. Jimmy's addiction is getting worse, and Billy's solution is to make him record drum parts until he collapses, which is like trying to cure someone's drinking problem by making them work at a brewery. There's no compassion, no understanding of addiction as a disease, just frustration that Jimmy's personal problems are interfering with Billy's artistic vision. The power dynamic is completely fucked. Billy writes the songs, plays most of the instruments, makes all the creative decisions, handles the business side, and probably chooses what color socks everyone wears. The other three are basically very expensive session musicians who happen to have their names on the album covers. Darcy later describes being in the band as psychological warfare, which gives you some idea of how pleasant the working environment was. Imagine going to work every day knowing that your boss thinks you're incompetent, tells you so regularly, and then wonders why you're not more enthusiastic about the job. Melancholy and Infinite Sadness in 1995 is a double album that's simultaneously the creative peak and the relationship nadir. Billy's written 28 songs, arranged every part, and micromanaged every second of recording. The result is magnificent and completely soulless. It's the sound of one person's vision executed perfectly by people who've been ground down into submission. The tour for that album is where everything falls apart. Jimmy's nodding off during shows, Darcy's basically checked out, and James is going through the motions. Billy's on stage pouring his heart out to 20,000 people, while his bandmates are emotionally absent. Then Jimmy gets arrested for drug possession, and Billy fires him. Not helps him get clean, not supports him through recovery, not even tries to understand that addiction is a medical condition, fires him. Because in Billy's world, addiction is a personal failing that interferes with the music, and the music is more important than the humans who make it. It's the most Billy Corgan response possible, treating a health crisis as a productivity problem. Jimmy's been the heartbeat of the band for years, the one member whose contributions Billy couldn't replicate or replace, and Billy's response to his addiction is just to eliminate the problem by eliminating the person. The replacement drummer situation is peak Billy Corgan chaos. He goes through multiple drummers, none of whom can recreate Jimmy's style, all of whom quit because Billy is impossible to work with, and also because they can probably sense that Jimmy's ghost is still haunting the rehearsal room. He starts making electronic music because it's easier to control drum machines than actual humans, which is probably the most honest artistic statement Billy's ever made.
Matt Walker, Kenny Aronoff, various session guys. They all come and go like temps at a dysfunctional office. Billy's looking for someone who can play exactly like Jimmy, but without Jimmy's personality, needs, or human frailties. Basically, he wants Jimmy's drumming skills in a robot body that doesn't require health insurance or emotional support. Adore in '98 is Billy's attempt to reinvent the band as an electronic act, which would be interesting if it wasn't so obviously a control move. Can't argue with a drum machine, can't disappoint a synthesizer, can't have creative differences with a computer. 3/4 of the original lineup, Billy, James, and Jimmy, reunite in 2018 for the Shiny and Oh So Bright tour, but it's like watching divorced parents trying to be friends for the kids' sake. The magic is gone because the relationships are poisoned. Billy got his perfect music, but he lost his band in the process. And throughout all of this, Billy's completely convinced he's the victim. Every feud is someone else's fault. Every relationship breakdown is because other people can't handle his genius. Every criticism is jealousy disguised as journalism. It's almost impressive how consistently he misses the point. People aren't upset because he's talented. They're upset because he's a nightmare to work with. But Billy can't see the difference between artistic standards and basic human decency. The tragedy is that Billy Corgan is genuinely brilliant. The Smashing Pumpkins created some of the most beautiful, complex, emotionally resonant music of the 90s. But Billy's so focused on protecting his vision that he destroys everyone who tries to help him realize it. He's like a master chef who makes incredible food but burns down every kitchen he works in. Technically perfect, emotionally devastating, and completely alone by choice. The legacy is complicated.
The music is undeniable. Tonight, 1979, Bullet with Butterfly Wings, Mayonnaise. These are songs that defined a generation. But the human cost was enormous. Bandmates traumatized, relationships destroyed, an entire scene alienated. Billy Corgan proved that you can be a genius and a terrible person simultaneously. That perfectionism and cruelty often go hand in hand. That sometimes the price of great art is everyone around you being miserable. He's still making music, still starting feuds, still convinced that everyone else is the problem. The beef magnet is still fully magnetized, attracting conflict wherever he goes. Maybe that's the point. Maybe Billy needs the drama to fuel the music. Maybe he's deliberately difficult because comfortable people don't write songs about infinite sadness. Or maybe he's just a control freak who happened to be really good at arranging guitars. Either way, the Smashing Pumpkins versus Everybody remains one of the most spectacular examples of how to alienate literally everyone while making beautiful music. Billy Corgan, proof that you can win every artistic battle and still lose the war of basic human relationships. If this deep dive into 90s alternative rock drama scratched your itch for messy musician behavior, subscribe because I've got about 15 more stories of bands who imploded spectacularly while making great music. Hit like because honestly, Billy would hate that this video exists, which makes your engagement even more satisfying. Right, I'm off to listen to Siamese Dream and contemplate how someone can make such beautiful music while being such a difficult human. See you in the comments, you beautiful non-perfections bastards. Please comment. I'm needy.